All right, can I go for it? Thank you, Maji, and greetings to everyone, colleagues on the call. Welcome to the Leadership Game 365 with myself, Dr. Pet Mazibuko. I also want to issue a special welcome to our regulars, our members of the TLT 365 community. Welcome, we are glad to have you with us. I also want to welcome our new guests that are joining us, be it a Zoom or Facebook and YouTube. Welcome to the Leadership Game 365. Yeah, colleagues, it's quite interesting to have you with us here. But a special welcome to our panelists, starting with Shamin Shandu, Umtanagasuchigazi. Welcome, Shamin. Welcome to Dr. Sani Kamete. Welcome to Ben Nukanen, a former colleague of mine, great colleague of mine, Enu. Now, thank you so much for joining us. Colleagues, I'm very, very excited about today's theme. It's a very interesting theme, and I would want us to get started straight away. But for those that are connecting with us for the very, very first time, at TLG 365, we basically engage with scholars, thought leaders, and future leaders. So it's been a very great journey to date. So colleagues, TLG 365 is nothing else but leadership. So Your Excellency and my colleagues, people often ask me, why are you basically driving these kind of programs? Colleagues, it's because I'm very passionate about leadership. I've told people a number of times, and I am on record, having told people that I am not a leadership guru, but I do consider myself a passionate and a permanent leadership student. And I think I am joined by a number of passionate and permanent leadership students. So colleagues, today our theme is that of offensive leadership. But before we go down to that, because time is a very scarce resource, I have a quote that I actually put together, colleagues. It goes like this. Things rise and fall in the hands of leadership, be it capable or incapable. Let me repeat this again, colleagues. Things rise in the hands of leadership, they rise and fall in the hands of leadership, be it capable or incapable. So it's all about leadership, colleagues, and that is why that is important. That being said, then, colleagues, and like I said, today's theme is about offensive leadership. So the question could be, why offensive leadership? Is very simple. Offensive leadership is part of a management strategy. So, but we've got we are blessed to have His Excellency Professor Dr. Tal Edgars with us here. Colleagues, I had already taken liberty of posting up his impressive profile on Facebook and LinkedIn. So you can basically take your time if you have not had a chance to do so. But without any further ado, because we don't have much time, I'm just going to ask that I introduce him briefly to come online and also ask him to basically share his presentation. Like Margie had said, for the rest of us, I'm going to ask that we mute and also switch off our cameras. I'm going to ask that we listen attentively, more especially our panelists. When he is done, I'm then going to go to our panelists and ask them to respond and so on. It's going to be a very interactive session. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, to my fellow colleagues within the TLG 365 community, let me welcome you and also introduce to you our guest speaker today, His Excellency, Professor Dr. Tal Edgars. Over to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pat Mazibuko. There's never a moment such as this that such a welcome on a day like today when we are talking about our finals. It sounds very resounding. I have taken the liberty of presenting and putting together a presentation on offensive leadership. And I think it is a question that we're asking at such a time where we find ourselves in a country where we're seeking direction prior to the election. So if you'll just allow me, let me just share my presentation. And here we go. That should be it. Let us share that. I think it is visible, is it? Yes.
It is indeed. Thank you so much. You may proceed.
So while talking about offensive leadership, the topic that I got down to is looking at it from a perspective of the games. And I looked at the Springbok game. All of us are very familiar to our boys. And one of the things that I thought about was, let's talk about no scrum, no win. What would it look like when we talk about offensive leadership from a sports illustration perspective? And then we focus on that in business and how we do things on our daily lives. So if you look at this particular position, this is what we call a scrum down. And each of the members has put in their effort, because as we roll from one side to another side, each of the strengths are tested here. So what is offensive leadership? The Merriam-Webster defines offensive as making an attack, an aggressive of or relating or designed for attack. So one thing that is very clear is that it relates to a team being in possession. Okay. Dr. John Townsend, who has done considerable work with athletes in action, posits his ideology of offensive leadership in the fact that offense is the opportunity part of your job. It is the aspect of being able to move ahead and take initiative and take the heel. He even goes ahead to further suggest that you have to see an opportunity that is not yet before others do. You have to think leader thoughts. Now, much later, of course, we can debate on what leader thoughts are, because it is actually advisable that most of the leaders must take time to themselves to think about leader thoughts. Now, I want to talk about 5 lessons I personally have seen in offensive leadership. I have taught in offensive leadership. I've been a part of in organizations in offensive leadership. And the first lesson is you must learn to take joy in the dirty work. If you're on the 0 line when we are playing rugby, you may have a solid core. You may have the ball with you. You might not have a 6-pack. Your linemen are drawn out, and things might look very, very dirty. In a world full of people with big ideas, it's the people who are willing to not only do the dirty work, but who learn to enjoy it, who actually make those big ideas happen. This is something that we see both from a political landscape and a business landscape. The people who have got the necessary right attitude to make the dreams work. That is the first lesson I learned from offensive leadership. We go on ahead to think about the second lesson. You only become keenly aware of how your decisions impact other people. If a quarterback, a running back misses a handoff exchange, your team could lose a fumble and maybe lose the game. If you miss a block, one of your best friends could end up with a concussion or a broken body part. One of the attributes which separates an average leader from a stellar one is how well are they able to understand the impact their decisions have on other people. How well do we understand the people around us, and how well do we understand the accountability of the actions we take and what it might potentially do to the people around us? So I went ahead to draw down what was then in the American football lineup. This is what we call the offensive line team. For those of you who've had keen interest in what American football looks like, the design schematic of offensive leadership is that in American football, the offense is the team that has possession of the ball and advances towards the opponent's end zone to score points. Now, there are 11 players of the offense that can be separated into 2 main groups. The 5 offensive linemen, whose primary job is to block opponents and protect their quarterback, and the other 6 backs and receivers, whose primary job is to move the ball down the field by either running with it or passing it. The organization of the offense is strictly mandated by rules. Just like organization, there must be at least 7 players on the line of scrimmage and no more than 4 players. They are only players who are eligible to handle the ball during a normal play, or the backs and the 2 players on the end of the line who we call the ends. I've taken the liberty to draw this in a way that we all understand. This is the organogram of the National Empowerment Fund. Sounds oddly familiar that when we talk about rugby, when we talk about American football, we don't think of it in the instance of what our organizations look like. The chairman, the board of trustees, the CEOs, the committees that exist, the functional executives, the business executives, all of those play a role and they play a part in the entire game. Let's draw it down into seeing what part of this hierarchy makes sense when we talk about offensive. Now, in the American football positions, Offense is drawn down to this particular area. The wide receivers, the offensive tackles, the OGs who are the offensive guards, the centers, the offensive tackles, and the tight end and the wide end receivers. In an organization, we have lined out everybody with key specific responsibilities that they need to achieve with performance indicators that tell us whether or not they're doing that. But as a leadership of organizations, do we firmly understand the positions that our teams play? And do we understand the role we play? So the breakdown of the offense line. The offense line is primarily responsible for blocking the defense line of the opposition in order to protect their own quarterback. So as I say all of these things, you might as well mirror back to your own organization and think about it. Who plays quarterback in your organization? Who's the center? The center is the player who begins the play from scrimmage by snapping the ball to the quarterback. So the first person who gets the ball, who's the center, and passes it on to the quarterback. Who's the first person who takes on a role and passes it down the line? And so in the idea of organizations, we have got our functional executives, we've got our business executives, we've got our stream leads, we've got our line managers, we've got employees, we've got support staff. Who is your center in your organization? Who has been given the prime responsibility to block defensive players? Who has been given the prime responsibility to call out blocking assignments and to make last-second adjustments depending on the defensive alignment? So when you go to strategic sessions, much of what has always been said, and I look at it very keenly, when we talk about stakeholder engagement, what the board is saying and what the leaders are saying is never the same. Here to understand it's the same thing we are doing now in our political realm. What the organizations are saying and what the politicians are saying is not the same. Somewhere along the line, somebody did not pass the ball. So then we go down to an offensive guard, the OG, the two guards who run, their function is to block on both running and passing plays. Understand that critically, each of these players has got a specific role they have, and they must have a specific skill. In our human capital taxonomy and our talent of organizations, every organization has got have identified a person who's got a key skill, key responsibility, key outcomes expected from the individual. So in your organization today, who are your offensive guards? Then we have the offensive tackle, the OTs. This one's role is primarily to block on both running and passing plays. But understand this, that if you have a right-handed quarterback, the left tackle is charged with protecting the quarterback from being hit from behind. So when we go into boards, half the time, the chairman sets the tone. You have got quite a couple of board members and they leave the chairman open for an attack. What happens is organizations fail to own the strategy. They fail to own the direction of the organization. They fail to own the decisions that the leadership is taking. Now, tackles typically have a taller, longer build than interior offensive linemen. Now, this again, we are drawing organizations. You've got the stronger build that is within your maturity band. You have got executives who have been in the business much longer than those ones who have not. You have got your key interns who have just come in. You've got new deployments within your organization. Here we are now talking about skill transfer. How do we transfer knowledge and keep up to date between the most senior, seasoned executives, the most senior, seasoned leaders to the junior leaders, and we continue to build them enough to pass them the ball during blocking situations? Suffice to say that many organizations, when we talk about succession planning, have not really factored in the understanding that there are some juniors who need to be mentored into roles because they see them as competition. So these are the offensive tackles. Then the quarterback, the seasoned executives, the ones who have been in the business, the ones who are carrying the skills, the ones who have carried some of the institutional maturity knowledge. They are considered to be the most influential position on the offensive side because the team's progress down the field is dependent on their success. When we start talking about leadership accountability, when we start talking about leadership efficacy, when we talk about leadership maturity, when we start talking about leaders' personal attributes that they can bring to the business, there's a sense in which today in organizations, leaders are not self-accountable. We have to legislate them for them to run the organizations. We have to legislate recommendations and metrics for them to mentor the juniors. That in itself creates a very different outcome when we start talking about offensive leadership, because now the organization is only working on reaction. Let's talk about our state-owned enterprises. What we are seeing is a reactive industry that has come into play. Half the organizations are not creating an offense strategy. They are purely on defense. Every single time something happens, we run back and we start to question what went wrong. Yet over the years, we have already had periodic statements that have said this will happen. Like right now, we are talking renewable energy. We are talking hydrogen. We are talking where the world is going. Look at what Dubai has done. Offensive strategy. What Rwanda is doing. Offensive strategy. How do we deploy that within our own teams? How do we build that as a skill? So we talked about the quarterback, and now we're talking about the running back. The running back are the players who line up behind the offensive line in a position to receive a handoff from the quarterback and execute a rushing play. So here are organizations that are saying, this is the strategy that we have come up with. We need to run with it, and this is what we intend to do in our community. Who do we pass it down to? Who is that RBHBFB in your organization that once they're given something, they can run with it? There's often a mistake made when we talk about offensive leadership where offensive leaders believe they're the ones who can run the play. That is the bare mistake, because it means that all success is hinged on you, and then you have decided to block out everybody else who might bring success to the table. The whole idea around offensive leadership is deployment. Learn the talent, deploy it, attract, retain, deploy it, attract, retain, deploy it. The wide receivers, they're the pass catching specialists. In organizations, you always find them coined with the terminology rock stars. They're typically very fast and tall. Their main job is to run pass routes and get open. People in organizations who pick the mandate and can run with it, they understand what needs to be done and they get it done. But their role is not to sit in the boardroom and to ponder over what strategy is going on. They're the people who pass the ball. Within your work streams, they're the people who you put in, and effectively as team leads and work stream leads, they're passing on the ball. They're cascading the principles of the business strategy to the human capital strategy, to the team strategy, to the business results. And we'll talk much later around that. Then we continue to see the tight ends. And as you can see on the display there, those are the people who stand until the end, especially on running plays. They are very frequently called on to block. In organizations, you'll find this one as the company secretaries, the legal teams, the legal departments. Their work is to constantly talk around risk. Where are we heading? What are the risks? How do we align? The organization must constantly play as an entire team. And that is the main rule of leadership, is how do we find people who fit within those spaces, equip them, and push them to the field to deliver. So the lesson 3, we only spoke about 2 lessons and there are 5. So lesson 3 is you're developing resiliency. How many times as a leader have you been given a great block only to have a running back and you cut the wrong way and you drop the ball? How many times have your teammates passed on the ball to you and you literally are the one who was targeted with getting it done and you didn't? The best leaders are masters at resisting the temptation to reciprocate blame. And part of offense strategy is when someone first puts blame on themselves, they form accountability. Rather, they smile when they're being criticized. They listen, they learn from the situation, they put it behind them, and they do all they can to do the best. We find a lot of this in organizations and even within small hierarchies where leaders have a shifting blame game, where it is not me, and we are seeing that even with the political space. It is not our government that has done this. It is the previous government that has done that. And there's another government. We will never really deal with the situation for as long as there's a blame that has shifted to another leader who's not here to defend why they made the decision they did. So as an offensive leader, the first thing is to take the blame, learn from what is happening, put the situation behind you, and do all you can to do the best and deliver the results that are currently being asked of you. by what is within the space you're in. The other part is you must learn to deal with other people's opinions about you. We suffer greatly as leaders, expecting that there should be this of a glorified sentiment that leadership should be untouchable. I have often walked into boardrooms and into government meetings where there's the them and there's the us. The people in boardrooms with chauffeurs and bodyguards, and then the people who open the gate and you're constantly seen as the people who have to run in. It's not a cohesive team. Leaders must learn to deal with people's opinions. You will not be loved consistently, and that you must be open to. Once you put yourself in the formation of leadership, you're saying to the public, I am opening my life for you to criticize me and for you to look at me. So the biggest test of offensive leadership is
sorry,
leaders.
sorry, Your Excellency, may I just interject? Please,
Yes,
my trusted guest, may I kindly ask that you mute? You are disturbing the flow by His Excellency. Again, please, all of us, shall we mute? Because we are disturbing the flow by His Excellency. Your Excellency, you may proceed. You've got up until 4:45 or 10:55. Thanks a lot. You may proceed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mazibuko. One of the things that I've often seen is leaders don't know how to deal with people's opinions. They take it very much to heart. So their emotions are on their sleeves. If we say the leader is bad, and by all means we mean it based on the results, the leader starts to provide a connotation and a philosophy that the leadership has been said to be bad all down the line. Not entirely. People have to judge you, and they cannot judge you based on what you do at home. They have to judge you based on what you do at work, because that is in itself the proof of concept that as a leader, you're open to critic. You can receive your credit, but you have to learn to do the best and not be stopped while constantly being blamed. There's a whole shifting of blame that we see in society today, enough to the point that it has interrupted cohesive growth. So the organic growth that we could talk about from government to government has been disrupted, because now there's a shifting of blame that takes us back again a couple of more years back into where did this organization, where was the glory of this organization before person X came in, right? And so we move on to lesson 4. You are learning the ability to work for delayed gratification. May I say, and I admit to the fact that we are lost to this, and I struggle with the leadership of today, because we are lost to offensive linemen wanting credit on the spot. If a leader is deployed, be it a CEO, be it a manager, be it an MEC, be it a DDP, it doesn't matter where they are. They want to receive credit immediately. There's no more working your turn. There's no more working your line. There's no more working with great difficulty. And if we were to look at it, leaders are faced with the same difficulties their teammates are faced with. So it does sound quite hypocritical when the leader says, this is the hardest season we have seen, but the team members are saying the same. So rather than to accept responsibility, not just for your mistakes, but the mistakes of other people, doing the best with what someone else has created, we move around with this chip on our shoulders saying, what is done, and so you cannot blame me. Offensive leadership is about accountability. It's about getting to a point where you know recognition is at the end of your season. Often I have laughed that the forebearers of Pan-Africanism are not here today to witness the very countries that they fought for. But if it were that they were to be around, would they be surprised at the decisions the leaderships have made today, be it in business or in government? If they were for what they fought for, would they be surprised at the end of the day for the things that they see? And following keenly to why I'm using Springbok is when the captain was asked, when they fumbled a play, and he said, well, we always go out there and we do our best. We don't have the best kicker. One day somebody can be good at it and tomorrow they don't do well. Ours is to support them, to get back in there and to put in our hard work. Leadership needs people like that who can keenly look at areas that we can put in our personal best. Not our society's complex, our personal best. Doing the best with that which someone else has created for you. And so as we move along, the lesson 5 you will understand is you learn to listen well and react quickly. I've put there a picture of one of the greatest reactions we have seen in the World Cup. When a ball was in play and it was passed down the line, Chesley took the ball and ran to the try line. What we have to learn is we need to learn to listen. I have often sat in conferences, I've sat in Indabas, I've sat in so many other meetings where leaders are quick to react without keenly understanding what is the philosophy that these people are driving at, far away from the narrative. What's the philosophy? What is it we are saying that we are doing wrong? And what is it you want from me to be able to assist us come together with a solution? We must learn to listen well in constantly changing pressure-filled situations, because that is the hallmark skill of an offensive leader. You must be prepared to listen well, and to react quickly, making sense of change while it changes to the point that we can execute on the change. Making sense of it. Not entirely noticing what is just happening, but do we make sense of change? Do we understand that as the markets shift, the needs of our people have shifted? Our people are asking for something entirely different from what we gave them 5 years ago. They're asking for a different caliber of leadership. They're asking for a leader who can respond to situations. And mind you, I say this while knowing fully well that we are capable. A person said that Africa is not poor. It is just in an advanced state of decay. Leaders who have ignored until now, we are rotting right at the roots. Offensive leadership is like a tree. There are teams that will make the branches, others that will make the leaves, and others that the seasons will blow them to break. But an offensive leader is the roots that hold the tree enough to support the tree to grow. We have to cultivate an understanding that we are there to be conduits of growth for people who will come in and execute. But that is not the case today. The case of offensive leadership is aggressiveness, aggression. I want to be seen as the master. I want to do it all. I want to execute it, and my name must be known today before I pass and perish. Ask me that and I would tell you it is completely foolery, because now we must question what is the caliber of leaders that believe they can do it all on their own. And that in itself is what cuts us from understanding as offensive leaders, what can we change? Because we are not listening well. We are not reacting quickly. Our people are saying on the ground, you're creating a lonely path. If you want to do it, walk it alone. So we have an offensive talent management model that I put in here just so that we can play this out in an actual scenario. You will find that before you can start talking to your teams, your people, yourself about being an offensive leader, define what the needs of your people are. Discover what kind of people you need. Develop their potential, then deploy. We are very quick to define and deploy in this country, and many others. We want to invest in institutional matching and movement of talent. We want to. By all means, we do. We want to enable knowledge sharing and critical skills. We want to support diverse teams. But how do we support that without integrating them daily into development? We have lost the cause and the compass and the direction, because half the time when we speak to our people, we have ignored the needs they have, but we ask them for results. That is a defense mechanism, because all you want to say is, I want to report the result without doing the work. We must align with defining what we need, discovering the talent that is required, deploying it, and developing over time. We must be able to create an offense of how do we take people from step A to step Z with a very clear defined model. Not just we want to create jobs. It is not enough to say that. We must do more than that. So if we are going to talk about high performance differentiators, what is it that offensive leaders know that we must develop? They have got high performance differentiators, market focus, a high performance anatomy, distinctive capabilities. But the capabilities we need to define and develop them for is a dynamic capability, a culture alignment, a leadership capability, an ability to change, human capital efficiency, a workforce performance, because we cannot ask of people things we do not have ourselves. So as an offensive leader, the first thing is to understand what are your high performance differentiators, but then what are your human capital capabilities, and how do you cross match them over the period of time that you're working. But be that as it is, there's no offensive leadership without pros and cons. I'll start with the cons. The bad news always starts first. Offensive leaders are always seen to be making rash decisions. They're jumping the gun. They are always, the tail wags the dog. They constantly want to run into a situation and people fail to understand because they didn't bring you into the process. The failure to gain input from employees, it always seems as if they're running a lonely path. It's about them or the highway. The lack of detail orientation. Like I said before, have we discovered talent? Have we deployed talent? Are we consistently embedding this in organizations and in our daily life as we continue to grow, even as we mentor others before? They have minimal crisis management skills because as much as they're running around, they seem to be very busy, but the results are not being seen because it's not created in an adaptive, organic pattern. But their pros are they chase opportunity. These are the good people who bring the big ideas. They're the go-getters. They're the ones who can move large-scale change. They're the ones who are aware of industry trends, looking for new ways to corner the market, and they use trends to maximize profit. They're the ones who are connected to the wants and needs of the customer, the wants and needs of their team, but they must exercise discernment because as they carefully evaluate opportunities, they must know which ones will produce the best results, but over and above that, produce the best team. Forward movement when everybody else hesitates. Offensive leaders are the kind of people who have already formed a belief that says, once an idea enters their mind, it stretches their dimensions that it never regains its original dimension. They're people who have got an ability to adapt, adaptive thinking to the point that fear and uncertainty cannot disable them. They are producing action without hesitation. Trepidation is not part of where their blocks for opportunity lie. But a true leader sees the path forward, even in the haze of uncertainty. Offensive leadership is allowing that trait to set people apart and enabling them to thrive, developing them, coupled with understanding how do we augment that over a long period of time. In my closing, so that I can allow us to have a conversation, the best defense is a good offense, but that lies solely in what the Springboks analogy is. We go at it as a team, we win as a team, we lose as a team, and we try as a team. Offensive leadership is best placed in the hands of people who have understood that hierarchy means nothing if they are not part of a pack of people who they can produce results and support as they move forward. Thank you very much.
Wow, Your Excellency. Thank you so much. And I love it. You've kept me awake, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. But in the interest of time, ladies and gentlemen, I want to afford my panelists to basically respond to what His Excellency Prof. Edgars have said. I'm going to start off with my trusted colleague, Ben Nokanen. Please have your say on the issues of the day based on what His Excellency has said. Ben, just be succinct. As you know, the game is open. Ben, coming first.
Thank you, Doc, and thank you, Your Excellency. I think that, yeah, thanks for the presentation. I think very insightful. I myself, in this presentation, Doc, I battled quite a bit to just understand what is offensive leadership a strategy of leadership? People talk about the traditional ones, the transformational ones, servant leadership, sometimes autocratic, and to a lesser and to some extent democratic. But in the Prof's presentation, I saw most of those elements coming within the offensive. But I think it sort of brought it home when he began to speak about the pros and cons, where then the aggressiveness element is raised in terms of what offensive leadership is. And for me, it's not a question. It was just me trying to place how would one drive offensive leadership. I mean, we're always chasing opportunity. Is that offensive or not? But I see that that's being highlighted as a positive within leadership, within the offensive leadership stance. So it was fascinating that with my confusion around that being a strategy or not.
Colleagues, may I ask that we mute so that we don't disturb the flow? May I humbly ask that we remain in mute so that we can proceed? Proceed, Prabin.
So Doc, yeah, I think for me it was, is this offensive leadership as strategy? And I mean, if you think a structure of a normal business, it really is born out of if you trace the origins, it's a military sort of stance, born out of the military, where you focus on efficient decision making, coordination of activities, and just being able to delegate tasks. So I see how, when we look at the cons, especially, is how most of those can be overlooked if you're chasing opportunities. So quite insightful. I learned a bit more about American football in the context on how we should apply some of these leadership qualities. But yeah, very useful. Thanks.
Now, thank you so much, Ben. Let me invite Dr. Kamenze. Please have your say on the issues of the day. Then I'm going to go back to His Excellency and ask him to respond on one or two things. Dr. Kamenze.
Thank you so much, my brother, and greetings to everyone. Thank you so much to our distinguished guests who are joining us in different platforms. It's such an honor, Dr. Pat, to have us here, and it was quite an insightful presentation on offensive leadership. It was quite enlightening, Prof. And I think I've picked one or two myself well, as some along the way, especially that into issues of leadership. Allow me, before my network become unstable because of the weather, to just highlight that, you know, as Prof was presenting and sharing issues of offensive, I was quite taken by the use of, because we are excited and in the mood, especially in the country where we are waiting anxiously to the outcome tonight. So for me, he made it very relevant, very practical, and I could see, even though I don't understand much of the sport that everyone is excited about, I follow and support because it's my country, but I don't understand it. But in this context, he made me really understand the issues of offensive leadership, and I was taken by the issue of collaboration. That's what I have understood from this, and it stood out for me to say, as a leader, you have to collaborate, you have to work. And one of the the word that kept on being in my mind was the issue of no compromise. Offensive leadership quite take me to the issue of no compromise. And the only way to do that, I think, is making sure that you involve people, as Prof has indicated, that you consult, you go to people and say, hey, how are we doing? How do you think we can do this? Involve the team, work with the team, take the fall with the team, and celebrate with the team. It shouldn't be about you. It shouldn't be about pointing fingers. You can't call for no compromise. You can't call for accountability when you were not involved, when there was no collaboration, when it was just you pointing fingers to say, do that, do this. This is where we are going now, without putting a very clear strategy, even to your team in a business context, where you basically the one who leads with an iron fist. So this reminded me of how I am actually mentoring my wife as she's running our second business, where it's more of more collaborative and letting her run, and also hearing from her as well to say, what do you think about this, instead of me using my prior knowledge in running businesses to say, I think this should go like this, I think that should go like that. So I was quite taken, and I'm quite interested to unpack more of this. Thank you so much, Prof, for sharing this insightful information with us this afternoon.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you, Dr. Kamenza. Before His Excellency responds, I just have a question or two. So, Prof, how does one balance the issues of pros and cons in this strategy of offensive leadership? I mean, it would come across as if you really have to apply your mind and say, look, I've got to put one aside and move with this one because that is what I have. But secondly, it would come across to me that offensive strategy is one that challenges the status quo. And I think when you decide that I'm going to apply the offensive strategy or offensive leadership, you've basically drawn the line in the sand that I'm going to challenge the status quo. But the third question, before you respond, Your Excellency, is offensive leadership sustainable in the long term? And how is it sustainable? Over to you, Lindsay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mazibuko, and the rest of my colleagues who have raised very pertinent points. First off, just so to mention that offensive leadership is indeed a strategy. You can call it a tactic. You can, there's quite a string of alphabets that are heralded when we start talking about offensive leadership. Now, take that away from what are leadership dimensions and traits. And that's a conversation for another day when we start talking about what kind of leadership dimensions exist and what kind of leadership traits exist. So offensive leadership in itself is a strategy. Secondly, is that offensive leadership is based on the leader themselves who deploys it. And this I speak from the outcome of business or in corporations or private business. There's a maturity band that we create in the world of the taxonomy. The taxonomy says person X thinks critically, can assess situations thoroughly, listens attentively. You're in maturity band C. Person X can motivate others to act. However, he cannot include diverse communities. You're in maturity band B. You already grouped based on your human capital taxonomy in an organization. So what it means is you need to be the kind of leader who can find the people who can last with the strategy. It is never clear when we pass on from the coach to the players that they will deliver on the game. That is never the promise. The promise is the coach will give you the play, you have put in the hard work, and you have all been deployed to run your position. If you work cohesively, and hence the terminology collaborative governance, should you deploy collaborative governance, which is a systemic understanding of working together, you will deliver on your outcomes. The point always becomes when the leader feels there is a boss and there are people. Leadership is not about extracting yourself from the process. Leadership is about being the conduit. And I say this again, you're a vehicle, moving parts of the organization. All these other people are moving parts of the organization to get you to whatever your vision is saying. So in response to Dr. Mazibuko is saying, is it sustainable? Yes, it is. But it is hinged greatly on the leadership. It is hinged greatly on developing the skills of the people that will deploy that strategy. Failure to which, then it would result into it being a defense strategy, where the organization is reacting without having any horizon scan. We are not aware where we are going, so we will just run, and when we get to a corner, we are backed up a corner, we will respond out of that situation. So leadership must be, the very first critical component is, who am I as a leader? What are some of the leadership dimensions and traits I have that I can then seek the areas of support from the others? Thank you.
No, thank you so much. Shall we move on and let me invite Charmaine Shandu. Please have your say on the issues of today, followed by Veli. Charmaine and Veli in that order. Charmaine?
Thanks, Doc. Okay, so a question on the chat, inviting everyone's thinking and hopefully contributions on how do we change the perception that female leaders can only be nurturers in organizations. I mean, you hear beautiful terms being thrown around that if women are in leadership, then the company has a soul. Yes, I get that, and I totally accept and I'm aligned with that focus or strategy. But when a female leader steps up because the organization needs it in an offensive strategy, then people tend to get shocked. And then that's when the name calling comes and resistance even comes. Whereas we see a different reaction altogether. If a male leader is offensive, it's perfectly acceptable. But when it's a female, and I'm very happy that the prof just positioned it well, that it is a strategy. It doesn't mean that I'm an aggressive person. It means I'm applying this so that I can achieve business outcomes. So how do we address that and create that mind shift?
Thank you so much, Charmaine. I want to go to Veli Undabagamoilase. Veli, please come in before we go back to the prof.
Good afternoon, Doc. Thank you so very much for inviting me, and thank you for the platform. And thank you to His Excellency, Prof, for such an exciting presentation. And I think there's something that he said, which really, I think, clarified this thing for me, because I don't like to normally create these binary worlds. I think one thing that he spoke about, when you talk about this offensive leadership, it must be seen as a tactic or a strategy. Because to me, how I look at it, that's why we get to talk a lot about situational leadership, because you lead based on what's happening at the time. So one cannot just be fixated onto saying, I'm just an offensive leader, and then get to forget about other things that are happening, because you tend to leave other people behind. Because if you are leading yourself and then you are moving forward and people are not following you, then who are you leading? That's a great question. So leaders, at times tend just to forge ahead without really developing people, because it's well and good to have strategies. To go out there and map these strategies out. But the question that normally gets left behind is, does our culture allow us, to be able to get, to that place? Because culture is the one that will keep your people together. And I think for me, as someone who's very passionate, and I help leaders a lot in terms of understanding how the brain works, and as well as how to really apply and understand, how the brain interprets things. Because you may be offensive, but you're actually pushing people the wrong way. Because some people are not seeking as a person who is offensive, but they are risk averse, some are risk neutral. So whenever you talk about change in any setting, to the brain you are saying, here's a snake in front of you, and people want to run away. So if you don't really engage them and try to make them understand from the brain perspective in terms of how to really accept this change, because there are basically two elements of change, I mean, that I get to unpack, where we talk about the fact that there's a difference between change that is chosen and change that has been, you know, sort of like that is desired. So when you just impose change to someone that they've not chosen, and you don't sort of like engage them so that they can, I mean, get them to have that thirst that they want to change, then you have lost them completely. So I think for me, I mean, like Prof has actually, I mean, stated this very, very, very well. And at the same time, it's an issue of, like, I love it what Charmaine was referring to in terms of how do you get to deal with women that are put in these positions, and yet they need to bring in this women element into fray. But the question is, the truth that we need to accept is that we are living in a capitalistic world. Even when women are appointed into positions of power, they're expected to man up. They're expected to be very rough and to get it, because it becomes about bottom line. So I think those are the elements that are important that we need to, you know, that we need to highlight. So offensive leadership alone, it should be seen in context, you know, especially when change is upon us. But if we're going to look at it, I mean, we're going to look at it as the thing, then you're going to lose a lot of people. That's why then people end up getting into depression and things like that. Thank you very much.
But Betty, I want to put you on the spot. Allow me to do this. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. Tell us who you are and what you do, because I think people can pick up certain nuances about you, but maybe just 30 seconds. Who are you and what do you do?
My name is Velindaba. I'm actually the neuroengineer. I'm all about transforming minds from mental darkness to mental light.
Lovely.
So leaders get to really understand what really drives human behavior, because it's well and good when you talk about all these concepts and boardroom stuff, but we don't really get to understand what drives people for peak performance. So I think it's about that. So I help them understand the human brain and then, you know, go for peak performance.
Excellent. It was very succinct. Let's get back to His Excellency, Prof. Edgar. Please, can you respond to the issues of the day by my two panelists?
Thank you very much again, Dr. Mazibuko. I'll start with Charmaine's question, and it's a very good question. And of course, I'm about to make enemies while I go at it. The first issues we have in organizations today is we are refusing to admit, and one of the things that Veli had said as well, we are refusing to admit that there are systemic patriarchal systems that have existed for a long time. We want to transform organizations without transforming the very issue that we are supposed to then say we need to get rid of. So here you find two colluding narratives within organizations. One is we want more women to be involved, but we want women who cannot voice their opinion. So you are there to just form a focal position. You are there as a person to be seen. And Professor Moyo says this in her research, where she says that women are taking more leadership positions, but they're explained in more muted conversations. So the first understanding is we are dealing with a systemic issue that is heavily patriarchal. The second part is that we are seeking to create transformation from the understanding of we want to introduce Emakaya in organizations today. And what do I mean by that? That we have so many cultural differences, lived experiences, cultural diversity that is not part of the fabric of culture in organizations today. And so there's going to be a collision consistently based on the ideology that the transformation understanding was not built on how do we navigate the understanding of these cultural differences within business, and how do we then support the role of women as we drive them towards a position of leadership. So the understanding is not there. And this is coming now from a point of neuro leadership. When you talk neuroengineering, there's a part of your brain we call the PCF, the precortical cortex. At the end of the day, whatever information you have at the back of your mind transmits itself to the PCF. And there are two different distinct things that happen. It's either you have too much information or you have too much knowledge. We are saying organizations need to get to a point where they make knowledge-based decisions, not information-based decisions. The reaction point of organization is based on information. It will be good to have a woman because of triple B. It will be good to have a woman because of the leave no people behind. It will be good to have a woman because of the SDGs. We are still not solving the problem. And mind you, I say this quite with the reservation that 20 years from now, we will again come back here where our daughters will not have a position because we never dealt with the root of the problem. We dealt with what we needed to do, and that was our defense mechanism. Defense leadership saying, because they want women, let us give them women. But we have not created the infrastructure to support, mentor, to upskill, to reskill, and to create a support system for women. And that is why we are having more women coming out of executive roles and saying, I am done with it. Why? Because they went in and they found it was a boys' club. It is heavy. They have never had spaces to create a more softer understanding of how we need to change decision-making patterns. That is the first part. In regards to what my dear colleague Veli has mentioned, it is true that inevitably leadership must first begin with understanding our mental aptitude. And I dare say that we need to get to a point where leaders is not a certificate of a 6-week process. I frown at leaders who say, I went for executive training and here I'm a leader because I have stayed for 6 weeks at Harvard. That is not part of the process, and let us not get lost to it. Formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you wealthy. If we are to go back to leadership as it is, we must start to hone the mental aptitude of leaders within organizations. What are some of the soft skills? And I say this quite oftenly, and people ignore it. There are certain soft skills of leadership that we ignore. How do you relate to people lesser in station? How do you relate to your own family? How do you relate to colleagues? How do you relate to information? How do you relate to new ideas? If we can start to bring back an understanding that leaders are tested on the spot, we would not have to suffer for 10 years to know that you're a bad leader. There is something we call, and this we will talk about in another session, another day, there's leadership and there's misleadership. Misleadership is misrepresentation of what true leadership is. And Veli is correct. We have started to identify with misleadership as a representation of leadership. Thank you.
Yeah, Prof, Your Excellency, here's a question from me. I have in my mind what I call a triangle of success, and that is skills, knowledge, and attribute. Is there a direct linkage between the triangle of success and offensive leadership?
There is, of course, there's one part of that that is missing, because one of the things that you'd have to think about when you talk offensive leadership is exposure. I have to be able to move talent. So talent mobility is very important. And you'll notice the rotation with the Springboks game. The captain for last weekend is not the same captain for this weekend. The reason why we rotate you is so that people can have a certain feeling of ownership. It would not make sense if Siya Kolisi was captain back to back. He also needs to take instructions. If you cannot take instructions, you cannot give instructions. So the understanding that as much as we talk about talent and we talk about education, and that triangle fits very importantly and it's embedded within offensive leadership. But exposure then says, what if I moved you from this department and I took you to accounting? And we see this every day in boardrooms, where I know board members who are afraid to say, I don't know. And eventually they're actually given the mandate of a fiduciary duty. They don't know how to translate a P&L, but they're sitting on very, very important boards. It's comical when we see the commissions of inquiry and we listen to people who are chairmen, people who are judges, and we wonder, who recruited this person? It offends the very ideology of knowledge when we have to then ask, did we first of all understand the interpretation of the mental aptitude of the role for us to have then got the leader? We must first ask, what does this role define? Then we ask, what kind of leader are you?
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. But I want to go to my panelists now. And I want to go directly to Veli. Veli, please talk to us. What are the lead indicators of leadership bankruptcy in the bigger context of what we're talking about? I wanted to take us through that. What are the lead indicators of leadership bankruptcy in the context of what we're talking about?
Well, no, thank you so much for the question once again. So when you talk about leadership bankruptcy, I mean, when I run my workshops, I mean, there's one of the, one of the topics that I get to deal with. I call it leadership darkness. When you talk about leadership darkness, we're talking about, I mean, like I wrote, I don't know, you may have seen something. I wrote a piece yesterday where I spoke about us being socialized to believe that for people to be successful, they need to be in the right, they need to be in the right place at the right time. And now people say, no, how did you make it? They say, no, I was in the right place at the right time. But I say, but that's only 2/3 of the equation. The third element, to it is being the right person. You can be in the right place at the right time, but if you're a wrong person, you are not the person who's qualified, someone who is actually earned the rights to be there. That's where now we end up having this leadership bankruptcy, because we hire people because they've long been within an organization, they seem to be well qualified, but they've not sort of like done the time. They are not yet qualified, they're not well experienced, and they are not that material of leadership. So now others, they appoint others. Leadership bankruptcy, once again, can be created by all the political reasons that we appoint someone because we're gonna just want him to be our bucket man. He is not gonna make all the right decisions. So that's one of the reasons why we've got leadership bankruptcy. And then the other one you can look at it is like when people are technical, technical, you have someone who has got these technical skills or technical prowess. And then this guy is a good engineer. This guy is a good accountant. And then you make him a manager or a leader. And now what we expect is that, or what to understand is that leadership is not about you as a leader, but leadership is about bringing out the best in others. So if you don't understand other people, then, which best are you going to bring out? Because what you're going to tend to do when you get appointed to this role is that you're going to bully people around. You're going to be toxic because you don't have self-confidence. And it comes back to the issue that Prof indicated is excellence, which I loved, which is about when you talk about one of the qualities of being a good leader is the ability to listen. Because when you listen, then you are able to hear different perspectives. But that comes back to the issue of self-confidence. Because we can talk about all these things. People have gone to school, they've studied all these things, but they cannot translate them into actions simply because they lack, this self-confidence. So also you find that people who are known to be bad leaders, they keep on being promoted because they are said to be, bringing in these high levels of revenues. And this drives this toxicity in there. So I love it that when you're talking about this leadership bankruptcy, it's all about, the culture that has failed. Because when the culture has failed, because leaders have failed, it means that nothing is going to happen. Then you're going to end up hiring people who are not qualified because you don't want people who are going to challenge you. So those are the elements that contribute to leadership bankruptcy.
Thank you so much, Billy. I want to go to Ben. And Ben Okaneng, I want you to talk to us about the direct correlation between entrepreneurial leadership and then offensive leadership. Ben, over to you, sir.
Thanks, Doc. And it touches on some of the issues that sort of Billy raised in his previous bankruptcy response, where when we speak about entrepreneurial leadership, it's obviously you're obviously thinking out of the box, and you have bought into an idea that is mostly related to return, not necessarily associated with how you pull people with you. So entrepreneurial leadership or ventures are mostly number driven, and too many times, if you grow quickly, there's one or two companies I've helped in recent times where issues around leadership are always parked and never geared for growth. If you don't take some of these issues that the Prof has highlighted, which was quite important, listening, corroborativeness. So too many times entrepreneurs are very much caught up in the idea and want to make it work. So if you take that in terms of what we've learned in terms of leadership, offensive leadership, where you are quite aggressive, but you are in tune in terms of how you influence certain decisions, communication and adaptability. And most importantly, be able to really map up the vision, be accountable. And what I've heard quite coming out in terms of the conversation is also empowering people. I just found that, yeah, with entrepreneurial, we rough diamonds in terms of carrying out that angle. I hope that answers you, Doctor.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, very much appreciated. Yeah, colleagues, I want to move on straight to Charmaine. Charmaine, when I listen to His Excellency Prof. Edgar's talking about offensive leadership, it also became very clear to me that offensive leadership is about the game plan. But it talks to the fact that you've got to be able to think things through. Being a public speaker, take us through the process of thinking things through and making sure that you land at the right point. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. So it is very important to, first of all, understand the situation that you are in. Otherwise, as the Prof said, you will react. You need to view the situation and then react accordingly and react fast as well, because that is very critical. If you miss the opportunity and then apply whatever you think your reaction should be, you've missed the boat and you create confusion. So looking at always being observant, reacting to the situation and applying what you know based on what is happening at the time. And again, I'm going to draw on what Prof said about we have a lot of information, but we don't use knowledge. And sometimes that is what creates discontent, whether it's leading an organization or presenting an idea that you want people to, one, buy, and two, to actually react on or do something about. It's your call to action. So it is very important that you look at things holistically, move fast. So that speaks to agility as well. And you are able to drive results. So results can be driven by the leadership strategy, or results can be driven by what you say when you are given a platform to speak to people, because you speak to inform, you speak to influence, or you can be speaking to find an idea that they would not have previously thought of. So it is very critical to also apply the same situational leadership, so to speak, even when you are given a task to address people.
Thank you so much, colleagues. I'm going to take a decision and saying, I want to thank you because you've taken your time instead of going out there and preparing for the national. So we're going to finish early. But before we do that, I want to go back to the Prof, because I'm going to ask my panelists to give us what I call to actions. But I want to go back to His Excellency and say, when you talk about offensive leadership, what would you say is one thing that there should be a deal breaker of an offensive leadership? Or probably, and also make us aware of what is one thing that could be a blind spot in basically executing your kind of strategy. Over to you.
Thank you again, Dr. Mazibuko. I think one of the biggest pains that you'll have when we're talking about offensive leadership is the understanding and the knowledge that the leader thinks they meet the standard, okay, or they are the standard. And we find that a lot in African governments, and sometimes even out in the West or in the East, it doesn't really matter. But we must get to a point where leaders have got their self-benchmark and can easily say, I am not fit to fit in this office. I'm not fit to be in this office. And we don't have that. There's that ignorance, that self-ignorance that says, I'm the best and I have to do it. And so what that has created is a standard where people have stopped having expectations of the best. We don't know how to look for the best. We look for the only option. So when people are talking about leadership in Africa, one of the things that is very key, you'll notice, is people will always try to create a measure. He is better than him. Not he's the best to deliver. He's better than him, or she's better than her. And that then explains that we have lost the fabric of what true essence of leadership is for us to be able to go on offense. In Dubai, and this is a question I've seen quite roughly happen most of the times when they're in a conference, and I know I'll make enemies again, but I am at a point where I have to say what I say and mean what I say. They asked very key questions to the government, and they said, this is one of the questions we're asking. Why does a minister need a deputy? Okay. And of course, if you look at the hierarchy of what we have, we've got deputy ministers, we've got DGs, DDGs, and it goes on. Now, if we are not able to inform what kind of structures we have that can then support the growth of the things we are looking for, that is the first level of a blind spot. You're just creating, duplicating roles. It doesn't really fit. It's not fit for purpose. It's not fit for delivery. You're creating, duplicating roles so that you can show people, this is my performance sheet. This is what I did during my tenure. Indeed, it should not be that way. What it should be is there's a collaborative effort that comes in to say our leaders have driven us from X to X, and that is why we have them. So the blind spot always goes back to that understanding of just being self-indulged in saying no, but think right from the top of your mind and saying no, that I'm the only one who's fit to be in this office and I'm indispensable. That is a very huge blind spot.
No, thank you so much. Let's just proceed, colleagues. Let me go to my panelists and ask you to issue a call to action. I'm going to start off with Ben. Based on the conversations that have taken place here today, Ben, what would one thing that you would put for us as a call to action?
So, Doc, when we speak about aggression, I think from what I've taken today, it can be done in a very tasteful way instead of just understanding the word aggressive. So there are certain tenets that you want to take along, where what I got is we have to be really focused, right, in terms of how we take things forward, whether in business or in political realm or whatnot. So planning and having a nimble plan that is adaptable becomes very important. We have to be in tune with our external environment, create an environment that can enable people to deliver, enable your organization to thrive, and create opportunities where you're going to have pit stops in terms of Formula One. While we're speaking about analogies, just taking a breather and understanding, are we on track? We do in terms of where we're trying to go. So it is important that you create that rhythm at any particular moment, and that's what I'm getting. So when you do create those pit stops, that's where you take the opportunity to hear other people's opinions, learnings, and being able to take people with you. But the reality is, when you're bought into an idea, yes, chase it hard, but don't leave people behind.
Thank you so much for that fundamental point, Ben. I want to go to Charmaine. Charmaine, let's get some call to actions from you.
My call to action, Doc, is that first of all, any leadership strategy needs to be socialized. People need to be aware that this is our strategy. It also needs to be supported. Without those two fundamental steps, then you're setting up that strategic leadership process up for failure. So it must be supported and it must be communicated effectively.
Thank you so much. It was very succinct. Shall we go to Veli?
Thank you so much, Doc. And I think for me, just maybe two things. The first one is about self-awareness as a leader. That you are a leader because there are people behind you. You're not a leader because you are standing there alone and dragging them, kicking and screaming, but you are influencing them, inspiring them, and motivating them, just to forge ahead and achieve the results that you want them to achieve. And then the second one is the ability of a leader to be able to take advantage of collective genius, to appreciate that we all have slices of genius in us. And therefore, you cannot just do it alone with your only slice of genius. So when you talk about a team performance, when you talk about organizational performance, it's about tapping into those slices of geniuses and then put them together and be able to be just this central hog of this entire wheel, so that you can take it, and move it forward. So I think for me, it's about that, yes, self-awareness and collective genius. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. Then shall we go back to His Excellency, Prof. Elkas? Can you basically share with us your call to actions based on the deliberations for today? Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mazibuko. Thank you to my colleagues and those who are watching this. I believe that at the end of the day, the call for action is to simplify the terminologies that we have. We have decided to disrupt the market, and the market is disrupted anyway. But we are lost in the translation of so many of the things that even as leaders, we are caught in the connotation of that as a philosophy. We need to get back to the basics and simplify it for us to be able to deliver with the people around us. And I get this a lot when everybody has got management by walking around, management by McKinsey. There's so many terminologies, and we need to get to a point where we don't borrow everything. Yes, we have the philosophy, but how do we get to a point we can trickle it down to somebody in Mtata, to somebody in Mpangeni, that they can understand when we are seeking to develop offensive leadership, they are part of the process and they can create buy-in. We can no longer build things in silos and say this is for the educated and the uneducated are left aside. And I herald one of the things that one of my colleagues has said, leaving no one behind. We are completely at a point where we need that bottom line of the 12 to 13, 14 million people on social grants to be able to be removed from that and taken to a point where there is social flow protection, where we have got more opportunities for youth or where we have got more opportunities for women. But the discussions must start to be simplified rather than them being made too difficult for us to even implement. Thank you for having me, Dr. Mazibuko.
No, thank you so much, Your Excellency. I just want to go to Charmaine and ask Charmaine to do a vote of thanks for us. Like I said, colleagues, I'm quite honored to have you here, but I also want us to go back and make sure we're part of the planning for this evening's event. So let us close it from here, but we're going to have Charmaine to do the vote of thanks for us. Over to you, Charmaine.
Thanks, Doc. Struggling to find my buttons there. So I want to start off by thanking His Excellency for such a thought-provoking discussion and engagement and driving it. I did pick up a few things that I actually want to look into myself and apply in my leadership journey in my workplace. And then also all the panelists for their valuable contribution. And I would not forget to mention all the people that tuned in. I really think, hope rather, that you've picked up one or two things that you'll also personally take away and use to grow yourself into the leader that you want to become. Because if you do not learn and take anything away from this, then this afternoon would have been a waste of time. And then most importantly, I just want to say thank you to our technical team for supporting us. PK Creations, you guys made it possible for us to connect and to drive this message home. Thank you very much, Dr. Pett, for putting this through, this event together for us to engage on such an important issue.
Thank you so much, Charmaine. And colleagues, let us stop right here so that you can afford to an opportunity to go and prepare for your rugby match. Our next session is on the 18th of November. We're now taking a closer look at ourselves, that is personal health leadership. I think, colleagues, Your Excellency and my colleagues, we have a lot of balls in the air right now. There's a lot of stress, Velindaba, and I think it's important that we slow down and say, what is it you can do from a personal health leadership point of view? So please join us. From me, let me wish you well and thank you so much and God bless you. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.